I have to piggyback on that caregiving. That is probably one of the number one stressors in my opinion, because like I was a caregiver from 2010 till last year when my sister passed away, with my mother and father and mother-in-law and father-in-law, and then my sister. So I totally get that. And I am having trouble at this point coming down from all of that. And so that's one of the reasons why that I really feel like this program is going to be good for me, because I am trying to de-stress from all of that. But it's not easy to do once you've been stressed for so long and working a full-time job and trying to do all of these things, and a grandkid going through a lot of things, as you well know. I have been extremely stressed, but the caregiving is, I mean, that is such a good point. And I noticed that I've had heart skips. I've had different things that's happened to me very recently. And I just, I'm having a hard time getting myself out of that caregiving mode that I've been in for so long.
Yeah. And so thank you for sharing. And here's kind of the next level of that. So if we talk about stress, right, you might read about stress on blogs and see it related to what's called the HPA axis. Okay. And here's some nerdy stuff real quick, but it'll make sense in a minute. So the H stands for hypothalamus, and that's a part of the brain. Okay. That's the thermostat, we'll call it, in the brain. Okay. The P is pituitary, and so that's another part of the brain here. We'll draw it large so you can see it. And then the A is the adrenals. So on your kidney has a hat on it, and that hat is the adrenal gland, or the Hershey kiss in this picture. Kind of looks like it. Okay, so you have a H talks to P, talks to A axis. And what happens is when P talks to A produces cortisol. Okay, and then so this is the endocrine system, or the hormonal system. And when A produces cortisol, we've got cortisol in the system, and then it goes, the brain, the thermostat is sensing how much hormone, how much cortisol in this case is in the system, and based on that system feedback, the thermostat will turn up or down its message to the pituitary, telling the adrenals to make more or less cortisol. Does that make sense? So it's a negative feedback. If we've got a lot out in the system, we'll stop telling it to make so much because we don't need more currently. Or if we don't have enough in the system, the brain will tell the adrenals make more to help you adapt. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Enough
Sure.
sense. So it's kind of like if your kids aren't being loud, you don't yell at them to be quiet. But if they are loud, you yell them to be quiet, or at least I do. Okay, so it's kind of like how the hormone system works. If you're producing just enough, it's a nice smooth cycle. If you're producing too much or yelling, if the adrenals are yelling too much with cortisol, the brain will say, hey, quiet down. Or if there's not enough around, the brain will say, hey, make more. So I want you to understand that a little bit, but if you don't, it's okay. The point is the brain is involved, and the brain learns through repetition, right? It's called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity, which basically means neurons that fire together, wire together. So metaphorically, I talk about it in my book, is if you have a grass field and you take a four-wheeler and you just drive over that grass field one time, that day we could probably see the tracks where your four-wheeler drove, but by the next day or two, the grass bends back up and it's good to go. We can't see you were ever there. But if every single day you drive over the same path in that grass, eventually you're going to wear the grass away and maybe even make ruts. So we know, hey, this is the exact path they take every single day, right? Right or wrong, that's your path. Well, neuroplasticity does that same thing. So if you're caretaking for 10 years And that 10 years is you're just hammering, make more, dumping it, right? More. And what you're making is the thing that is the stress hormone. So it's making you alert. It's keeping you alive basically, and keeping you ramped up and able to push through and help these people in your family, because no one else is there to help you help them. And then that season is over. Well, first of all, cortisol and the stress response helps you be resilient and make it through. But oftentimes the caretakers, once that demand on them is gone, that's when they fall apart, right? It's like, wow, she's so strong. For 10 years, she's been taking care of these people, never been sick, never missed a day. And then now that situation has changed, the caretaking is no longer needed for whatever reason. And now that person falls apart. Okay, sick, chronic pain, maybe new diagnoses or whatever. It's because the resilience, she was resilient, he or she was resilient and able to get through that, but then smoke. So the cortisol, broke them down that way. But then now they continue to be anxious or continue to have, this happens a lot in PTSD cases as well, as it continues even though the trigger's gone. So we see this a lot in soldiers who come back and say they were, in Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, during the day, it was pretty calm. They don't have to do anything. It's not until about 6 p.m. sun goes down, they start cleaning their guns. They're ramping up to go out and do their stuff. And so, when you're cleaning your gun and going out and you don't know, is this my last day on earth? And you're about to go into, a real gunfight, you're going to ramp up cortisol and adrenaline and all that stress chemistry. And you're not going to sleep because you need to be awake to defend yourself. Well, then they finish their tour. Thankfully, they survive. They come home and now they can't sleep and they're up all hours of the night, right? And they have PTSD and things of that nature. Well, why? Because of the neuroplasticity. The brain had learned, they created those deep ruts that the brain and their physiology learned, hey, it's 6 p.m., time to clean your guns. And he hasn't cleaned a gun in months, but the physiology is trained that way at this point, time to clean your guns and defend yourself. Okay, so in the same way, a caretaker who for 10 years has been, redlining and cortisol to take care of everyone else, now they actually don't need to anymore. They have margin in their life to calm down, but the brain has learned, no, this is your default. So it's going to take time to create new ruts, right? So now you're like, hey, I want to calm down. And so I'm going to do some meditation and I'm going to do some deep breathing and I'm going to do some, dog petting and book reading and stuff like that. So you do it for a couple of days and you feel a little better. Cool. But then you stop because, you might think the nutrition made you feel better or something. So you drive a path for 3 days and then fall back into the old rut. No one's going to know that you drove a separate path after a couple of days, right? So for people to know you're on a different path, you have to be on that path consistently. And that's why, hey, for at least 90 days, let's build this path, let's build momentum, let's drive new ruts, hopefully, that your default path is this new one, right? Which opposes the one that you walked into my office with. Does that make sense?
Yes, I really hadn't thought about the PTSD factor. I've been like almost to tears, and I've been wondering what is wrong with me because, I hadn't thought about that aspect of
it. Yeah. And a lot of people don't, and a lot of doctors don't. And it's we want to snap. We think we should just be able to snap back. And it'd be great if we could, but that's a long-term, that's a long-term, essentially a long-term habit that you ingrained. And so it's going to take, essentially, you could look at it as training to change it, right? You need a new habit, a new behavior. And so the things you're implementing are targeted to get you there. And, there's no substitute in this case, if we're trying to create new plasticity or new connections, there's no substitute for time. Like we have to do it, disciplined, consistently, correctly, over time. Because you were, you know, whether you were consciously or not, you know, being disciplined in your cortisol over time as a caretaker, it had that effect.